You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name, and we will be doing politics this evening because we have as our guest Darlena Williams-Burnett, who is the Chief Deputy in the Recorder of Deeds office. That's Eugene Moore's office. She, perhaps more importantly, is running in the 7th Congressional District Democratic primary. We're taping the show on August 30th, the year 2009, and that primary is not till February 2nd, 2010, but nomination petitions have to be filed by the end of October, early November, so you'll probably see Darlena Williams-Burnett out there asking you, or maybe one of her supporters or one of her staffers asking you to sign a petition. We'll talk more about Darlena Williams-Burnett as we get into the show. But let me just start out and ask you about an issue that a lot of people have been thinking about, which are these bailouts, you know? I mean, right now what we're talking about, I guess, is really the economy and its slow start and slow recovery in this recession, unemployment in Illinois over 10%. Absolutely. But if you put yourself back into that mode of the fall of 2008, if you had been in Congress, the President and Speaker Pelosi and the Fed Chief and the Treasury Secretary would have asked you, Congresswoman Burnett, if you were in that representing the 7th Congressional District, would you support a $700 billion bailout to straighten out that financial sector?
Yes, and I know that was a tough position for a lot of members of Congress to make the call, but it was a very difficult time for the economy overall, and I think those that made the decision to vote for the bailout thought they were doing it in what would be the best interest not only for the residents or the citizen, but for the financial viability of the American economy together. So I know it was a tough decision, and as they saw the way things were unfolding after a lot of the larger financial institutions had received the funds and the stability, or I should say the commerce was not really flowing as had been anticipated, there was some drawback or some concern as to whether or not this was the right decision to make.
But if you had been there, would you have voted yes?
If I had been there, I think at the time, the way it was presented and everything that was going on, the downturn in the economy, I probably would have voted for the bill.
And now looking back, if you had been there and voted yes, and now we're looking at it almost a year later, in the end of August 2009, you think you would have said, oops, Darlena, that was a mistake?
Well, I don't know if I would have said it was a mistake. I probably would have been asking more questions at the time or making more suggestions that would have held the financial institution to a greater level of accountability. I think in our efforts to try and address one of the worst financial crises that the nation had experienced since the Great Depression, the rush was to save the American economy, and there wasn't a lot of thought process involved in what this would mean, if it really was going to save the economy, if it really was going to keep small and mid-sized businesses from failing, or if it was going to be some major bust. And I think that what we probably should have, and the U.S. Congress should have looked at, was putting some guidelines in place that would have assured the small business person and the mid-sized business person that these financial institutions would in fact put this money back into the economy or back into circulation, so to speak. And I think that a lot of them chose to try and shore up their balance sheets and hold on to the money, and it didn't really have the impact that was first told to Congress, and I think what a lot of the regulators had anticipated.
So what policy would you have, looking back, if you wouldn't have done the $700 billion bailout for the banks, what would you have recommended if you had the president's ear at that time?
Well, I would have recommended that there be some accountability. You just don't
accountability,
know.
but still give the money to the banks, but be accountable in terms of not just build up their balance sheets, but get going on the lending, is that type of thing?
Absolutely, but I would have liked to see them look at it more as they did on a case-by-case basis, as opposed to saying, here's this big chunk of money, you come and get it, and we're going to trust that you're going to do the things that are going to help our economy grow. So I think that we didn't put enough focus on accountability in terms of who was getting the money and how it was going to flow back out. And it's a double-edged sword when you start trying to over-regulate or give this money and then dictate how it should be dispensed. It becomes you get really heavy-handed in terms of from the government perspective, but at the same time, seeing what did occur, I think that if you're going to take those giant leaps into this side of capitalism or the private side of it, you have to take on all that responsibility and ensure that the intended purposes are the end result.
Now, State Representative Collins, who's also running in this race in the 7th Congressional District Democratic primary, said on this show, looking back, she would have done something more like giving out $10,000, wasn't clear either per person or per family, and let them spend as they want, and that would stimulate the economy more. Do you agree with Representative Collins?
Well, I don't know what her focus was or how she, responded to it. I think that there was the government did give some support to families with a certain income level. I don't know how much it was per family because I wasn't one of the recipients and I didn't pay close attention to it, but there was some effort to give and help those families, the low-income households.
$600 rebates.
$600
yeah, and I got to say, I spoke separately with Representative Collins, so maybe on the show, I don't know if she said 10,000, might have been less. So we'll have to go back and look at the show. But she clearly was talking about giving money directly to the individuals and to their families as opposed to the banks. And the banks would eventually get it because people would go out and buy things and borrow and so forth. So that general philosophy. You think you might disagree or agree with Representative Collins on that?
I don't really have a position on it. No,
okay.
I don't. I just don't.
Although, if you talk about getting money directly to people, one way to do that is with tax cuts, not just rebates.
Cuts, rebates.
Would you say you might favor tax cuts?
I'm always looking. I would always be looking for ways that would help the individual households become more stabilized, more financially stable. I don't know what amount would be an appropriate gesture or what amount would be important in helping to stimulate the economy, but clearly when government offers these rebates or there's some ability for households to save, there is more money that goes back into the economy.
Now, the Bush tax cuts that were across the board in 2001, all income groups, and in 2003, they're set to expire in 2010. If you're in Congress and you had a say about that, would you maybe say, maybe those Bush tax cuts shouldn't expire so people, because essentially then it becomes a tax increase and that hurts the economy. What do you say to that?
Well, I think those type of issues or concerns about whether or not it's going to hurt, I think we need to look at who would be impacted by when the taxes are rolled back, what income bracket will be most affected by the rollback. So before I could say who's going to be, whether or not it would hurt the economy, they may not be, if they're at a certain income level, they may not feel the pinch as much as those that are at a different income level.
The argument's made, a lot of the relatively high-income people, and these tax cuts would be, if they don't expire, would help everybody because obviously people with higher incomes pay more taxes, so it would help them more in the sense of not having a big tax increase. But many argue that those high-income people are often small business owners, and so by giving them a tax cut or not a tax increase, they'll invest more, they'll save more, they'll put more into their business, which will cause more jobs to be available for low-income people. You buy into that argument at all?
I don't know. You can certainly make that argument. I don't know that the tax cut would. What you would want to do is look back over the years that the tax cut has been in place, and then you could probably evaluate whether or not it created more jobs or whether it really was a stimulus for the economy or not. It's really hard to know where those savings are going to be realized in the economy if the rollback does go into effect.
So right now you wouldn't take a position on that?
I think that it was a tax cut and it had a sunlight provision in it for a particular reason. And I think that if we look to either roll it back or say no, it needs to stay in place, then we need to be able to substantiate that with what's going on, what has occurred in the economy since the tax break was there, and what you're looking to do with the economy as you move forward. Certainly any efforts to stabilize and create and generate more jobs, it's just not a proven fact that you'll create more jobs if you fail to roll it back.
You know, I mean, there's some people who are supply-siders, and they say whenever you can cut taxes, you give people more of an incentive to work, save, and invest, you'll get more jobs. So they almost always favor tax cuts. You know, Art Laffer came up with what's called the Laffer curve.
Yeah, there are folks from one side of the aisle that feel that any efforts to roll back or cut would represent savings in the long run or more stimulus in the economy. I'm not really of that school of thought. I'm really not. I think that you know, individuals that make more in a democracy, they have yes, they have a tendency to pay more, but those that are on the lower end of the economic ladder, as they are able to increase their income and their status, they're able to pay more in taxes too. So, well,
yeah, no, I mean, somebody, if you talk to Art Laffer, who came up with this, he's in favor of cutting everybody's taxes across the board, low income, middle income, high income, because he says they all, if their taxes go down, have a greater incentive to work, save, and invest. So he says low income people would stimulate the economy with that tax cut, as would middle income people, as would high income people. He say all people adjust to having a greater reward to their work, whether it's a person earning $200,000 a year or a person earning $20,000, because they all look at that extra dollar and say, how much did they get to keep? You see what I mean? So well, it's not, but in any case, you're kind of agnostic on that as to, you'd want more information as to what position you take.
Absolutely. From what I know of the tax cut, the percentage of the population that was impacted, it really would allow the balance sheet in terms of the federal government to receive billions of dollars in additional revenue. So those are all factors you would have to consider before you look at
healthcare. I mean, that's a big issue as we talk. We're taping this on August 30th, 2009. Yeah. It appears that issue may get decided in September or October as Congress comes back from recess, right?
Well, they're trying. They had a deadline or imposed point where they wanted to get some resolution, but who knows whether or not it will be signed by the end of September or not. There's certainly a heated debate going on right now.
You support the reform, the health care or insurance reform, however you want to put it, that Barack Obama and the Democratic Congress have put forward?
Right. I like to kind of shift the focus away from so much about health reform. Clearly there are some areas of health care that we need to focus on, and I think that when we have civil debate on what health care reform represents, we can move on that agenda. But I'd like to talk about insurance reform being a major component of what we're doing in terms of restructuring how we provide health care, how we make it available to those communities that don't have access. So I think that we're putting too much emphasis on health care reform when we're really looking at some effort to reshape the insurance, the health insurance component of how health care delivery systems are.
Now, some people say there are 47 million people uninsured that they want to try to cover, see that they're insured. Others say that number is really about 8 million people, that if you break that number down, if you deconstruct, there are really only 8 million people who really want insurance, health insurance, but they can't get it. Well, which one's right, the 47 million or the 8 million?
And no one knows what the true number is. I certainly don't know.
What's your opinion?
But I think it's pretty high. I don't know.
More closer to the 47 million than the 8 million?
I really don't know.
You don't know.
And like I said, it depends on, I don't know what type of research they've done to come up with that number. Certainly a vast difference between 8 million and 47 million. But what I know is there are so many people that don't have access to health insurance because they cannot afford it. And there's another large section of our population that are just automatically denied because of pre-existing illnesses. So when you combine those sectors of the population, and you have to look at another sector of the population that just don't have access. You know, they may live in communities where there are no ambulatory units, or the clinics are so far they don't have the ability to get to them. So when you start looking at these various sectors. You were a Cook County commissioner at one point, right? Yes, I was.
So you know that government.
I do, intimately.
How many? There are 4 hospitals, and what are there, like 25 or more clinics throughout Cook County?
You know, I've lost count. I know that recently with the
but a number of clinics, maybe some of them closed.
Well, you know, they do a lot of different things, though. Some more public health oriented. Some have ambulatory components. So it depends on what type of services are available at the various clinics throughout Cook County.
Well, you know, there's some people who say that there are about 13 million people here. Of those people who don't have health insurance have incomes above $50,000. And usually you'd think if your income is above $50,000, you can afford health insurance.
Absolutely.
There are 14 million people, according to this study that was done in 2003, maybe different now, that say that, I think a Pacific Research Institute, something like that, but 14 million people who have access to Medicare and Medicaid but don't take it. So that's 27 million people, according to the study, who don't have health insurance, but I wonder if we really need to help them because they have the income, or they don't have the income, but there's Medicare and Medicaid, and they just simply don't choose to access that. There are 6 million who are what they call the short-term uninsured. They're in between jobs. They're maybe without health insurance for less than a year, but they'll presumably be back with a job with health insurance. So you add up those numbers, that's 33 million. There's another 6 million, includes illegal aliens. Should the United States be subsidizing or paying for health insurance for illegal aliens?
Well, now that's a loaded question. I think that what we want to do... It's a loaded question?
I try to be fair here. Tough but fair all the time. We don't ask any loaded questions. There are no loaded questions.
Let's not say it's loaded. Let's say it is a tough question,
okay.
No doubt about it. I think that you don't want to be in a position where you're denying someone health care if they are in need. But the question becomes in whether or not you can afford to continue it. You know,
and charity begins at home. So if you got people in the United States who are legal and you're not taking care of it, do you want to attract people who are illegal because we're saying, come over to the United States and we'll give you free health care?
Yeah, and I don't know that America.
I mean, you buy into that argument? I mean,
well, I don't know that America's saying, come over here, we're going to give you free health care. It's just that if you find yourself here in need of health care, the humanitarian thing to do is to provide health care.
Well, we do now always on an emergency basis. People, if they're illegal or legal, they walk into an emergency room, nobody gets turned away.
Well, that's part of what we're looking at in terms of health care.
The question is whether we should give them a whole program of health insurance for somebody who's illegal.
Well, I don't know that they're looking to give health care away. What they are looking to do is create a level playing field, so those folks that are not able to afford insurance for whatever reason, their income is too low, they're in between jobs, they can't afford COBRA, they have a pre-existing illness with themselves or other family members, and they just can't afford health care. So what they're looking to do is create some access point for those.
Who's looking to do? You say they?
The Congress right now.
Congress, okay. The Obama Congress program.
Well,
Obamacare, can we call it that?
Well, I'm just saying
Pelosi
that's
care?
What the debate is about.
Well,
some form of access for all.
And initially, it seemed like the president said the public option was essential. Now he seems to be saying not so much.
Well,
what do you think? Is it essential or is it not so much?
I think if you're going to look at reform or trying to make sure that those that don't have access, then a public option is a viability. I don't know where do you get to this middle of the road, so to speak, in terms of who gets access if there is not some entity that makes it affordable and accessible for those that can't get in now because they can't afford it, or because they can say if you can afford health care and you have a pre-existing illness.
So why don't we give them a health insurance voucher that says this is good to cover whatever your costs from an insurance company if you have a pre-existing condition. We'd call it a health insurance voucher for those with pre-existing conditions. You don't need to set up a government company to do that. You just give them the voucher, and the voucher says, this is worth what I just said. It covers my costs. And then the company that gets it, the private company, when they get that voucher, they get reimbursed from the feds.
Then you'd be looking at whether or not the private company would accept the voucher. Would the voucher
Why would they accept it
if
it covers the costs? I would just say for whatever your costs are for the pre-existing condition. It's a generous voucher.
Well, if it's a voucher that says
we're not talking Chapter 8. You know about Chapter 8?
It covers all of the
housing
costs.
Vouchers. Those aren't so generous.
Then it's literally an insurance policy. How can you issue a voucher that's going to cover whatever the cost is?
It is. But the point is, it doesn't set up a government plan. It's a voucher to be used to buy it from a private insurance company. You understand the difference?
I understand the concept, but if we look
You like that concept?
I'm not sure I do or
You want
don't
to sign up right
like
here
it.
to the Berkowitz plan? We'll call it the
What
Berkowitz
I'm
plan.
saying is, you know, there's this pushback from the notion that the government should not be in the healthcare insurance business, but the government oversees and manages the veterans' healthcare system. The health insurance with Medicare and Medicaid has been in place for a long time. It hasn't caused us to be in a state of socialized medicine, but it is an option for folks that are older and on fixed income, and everything. Okay. You know what I mean?
So do you want that? Do you want that government option or not?
I think yes the government option is viable.
Viable or vital?
Vital and viable.
Okay, yeah. So you want that?
I think it's what we need if you're going to look at a holistic approach to reforming healthcare.
Let's go over to foreign policy. We'll go back and forth, foreign and domestic policy.
Okay.
Fall of 2008, if you were in Congress at that time, fall of 2002, if you had been in Congress way back then, President Bush comes to you and says he wants authorization to take military action in Iraq. What would you have done? The great majority of Congress said yes. They gave him that authorization. Even in the U.S. Senate, only 23 Democratic senators voted no.
Again,
23 senators voted no. I think they were all Democrats, I'm not sure. But 23 senators voted no. The great majority voted yes. Yeah. If you had been in Congress, would you have voted yes to give President Bush that authorization?
Well, I wasn't in Congress, but I was paying very close attention to what was going on. Of course, most Americans were afraid and feared that we were going to be in another attack. So I think that a lot of what happened, a lot of voting was based on fear and not so much on fact. And had I been in Congress as a private citizen, I said no.
You said no, but if you'd been in Congress, would you have said no then too?
If I had been in Congress, I really don't know. I know that a lot of them were, like I say, they were afraid not to vote for it. They didn't want to appear soft on foreign policy or military initiatives.
So you might have been in that group. You don't know.
I don't know.
But Barack Obama, as you know, spoke out in October of 2002, made a name for himself at the Federal Plaza. Were you there? Were you at that protest with Barack Obama?
No, I wasn't.
Julie Hamos, running for Congress in the 10th Congressional District, she tells us she was there. She was, actually, I think she says there are only 2 elected officials there.
Oh, really?
Speaking out. Maybe they were speaking out, Hamos and Obama. So you weren't speaking out then? I
wasn't speaking out then. My position was that we shouldn't go to war in Iraq, but that was as a private citizen.
As a private citizen, but you didn't publicly go out to that protest and fall. You didn't hear Barack Obama at that time?
No, I didn't. You
didn't hear him say that would be a dumb war?
No, I can't recall.
But he said that, you know.
No, well, no, I don't.
And then in November of 2002, he came on this set and he said, when I asked him that same question, I would have voted. He said, I probably would have. He said, probably would have voted no.
I probably would have too. That's where my heart was.
Now we're in 2009, and now Barack Obama has authorized additional troops to go to Afghanistan. I think there's something like 61,000. I think we've got 120,000 in Iraq. But Barack Obama, who would have voted no, is now expanding the war in Afghanistan, right?
Well, he's shifted over to Afghanistan.
Well,
that's for sure.
He hasn't. He's put more troops in there.
Yeah.
Fair. He's expanded the war. If you were there, and your commander-in-chief, Barack Obama, said to you, you got elected in 2010, you started serving in Congress in 2011. Hypothetically, if Barack Obama had added maybe 20,000, 30,000 troops, so in 2011 we've got 90,000 troops in Afghanistan, and Obama says this is the good war, this was the necessary war, this is the one we have to fight. Just saying, hypothetically, says to you, 2011, Darlena, I need your support. What are you going to say to Barack?
Well, you can't say yes or no, but what I would say...
He would say, Congresswoman Darlena Williams-Burnett. He would, because he's a respectful guy. We know that.
Right. And then I would say, Mr. President, there are so many factors that we need to evaluate before we look at extending our stay in Afghanistan and whether or not we want to be in the business of nation building or trying to put too much emphasis on. So I think that some of the things that we need to do, and this would be me talking to the president, I'd like to see the president or the American government look at is utilizing more diplomacy and some of the things they are doing over there in terms of creating these alternative crops and really working with the locals. I think we can do some of those things without the guns and the boots on the ground.
You want to bring the troops home. You tell them that. Bring those troops home.
I'm in favor of bringing the troops home.
From Afghanistan, from Iraq, bring them home.
Yes, I am.
All right. Start spending resources here in America, not abroad. That's
well, most definitely, you'd have more resources.
I mean, you say have resources there, but not manpower. Bring those, those military folks home from Iraq and Afghanistan. Right?
And show up the security right here.
Okay. Focus some of those resources they have on education.
Well, you'd have certainly a lot more, the need, you can evaluate where you put them, whether it's education or Homeland Security or doing some of the things that we did in.
You'd like to see more money spent on education now?
Absolutely.
Would you like to see more choice, school vouchers, charter schools? People in Chicago saying if they don't like the school, the parents can, if their public school is not performing. If it's performing, fine, but if it's not, you know, we're spending $15,000 per kid per year. Would you like those parents to be able to take that $15,000 and do what Barack Obama does, send his kid, send their kids, his and Michelle Obama's kids, to a private school?
Here's what I
spend
think.
About $57,000 a year for his kids. Shouldn't we allow $15,000 to be spent on a private school?
Here's what I think. When the government gets into the business of vouchering or doing these private, paying for students to attend these private institutions, you're not going to be able to keep up. I think that we need to focus on the type of tax base that allows for all public schools to receive the same level of funding. And we can't continue to rely on the property tax to get us there because there's so much imbalance.
But before you could change that, you don't want to give that choice even to a charter school? You want to say to a parent in Chicago that if you don't like your public school,
you're okay with charter schools. Charter schools, okay. I'm concerned about the vouchers because
concerned or opposed?
I'm opposed to them right now.
Is that because you're prior working with unions? You're a union organizer.
I am.
You were a union organizer, right?
I'm concerned.
You were also a Cook County board member, right?
Yes, I was. I'm concerned that the government can't keep up. You know, individual vouchers won't solve the problem.
Well, let me keep up. Spend the same amount of money that they're spending now, but you have more coverage. Because the cost is
not going to be contained.
But if it could be no more, just contain.
That's tough to know.
You don't know. We're going to continue to speak as the credits roll, but I very much want to thank Darlena, Cook County, what do we say? Chief Deputy Recorder of Deeds.
Yes, Eugene Moore's.
In Eugene Moore's office, that is Darlena Williams-Burnett. She is the wife of Alderman Burnett of the 27th Ward, right?
Yes, I am.
And more important, she is running in the 7th Congressional District Democratic primary. And how do they find you?
They can reach me at Burnett for Congress. www.burnettforcongress.com.
Okay.
And 312-307-2000 is the campaign number.
All right. And you're in to stay?
Yes, sir.
Danny Davis says he's the incumbent. He says he's running for Cook County Board President, but he's also circulating petitions for the 7th Congressional District.
Right.
If he decides not to run for Board President, runs for the 7th Congressional District, you withdraw?
I'm in the race. Once I get certified to be on the ballot, then we'll be in the race.
You're there to stay? Abortion, you're 100% pro-choice?
I am. I think that women should have choice, yes.
Even on partial birth abortion, you know, the federal government, the Congress passed a ban on partial birth abortion. Supreme Court upheld it. If you were there voting, would you have voted for that ban on partial birth abortion?
That is very controversial.
Yes or no? Which way would you vote?
I don't know.
You don't know? Same-sex marriage, would you favor same-sex marriage?
I'm not in favor of same-sex marriage.
I know. Civil unions?
What do you mean? Am I
in favor of civil unions? Yeah.
Well, yes.
But not same-sex marriage?
No, I don't.
You believe in the Second Amendment?
Yes.
People should be allowed to own guns?
Yes.
Handguns in Chicago, if they want to own a handgun in their home, should they be allowed to? They can't now. Should they? Yes or no?
Well, based on the law.
No. Yes or no? Would you? Okay, you would change the law so they